Hello, my name is Jim. Welcome to my Booktube channel about books, reading and stuff. This is November, and November on Booktube is many things, but it's non-fiction November. In this video I want to look at Gilgamesh the King, Genghis Khan and the making of the modern world, and the Library of Fragile History. I'll put timestamps in the video so you can look at which ones you're interested in. Gilgamesh the King by Robert Silverberg isn't strictly non-fiction. Robert Silverberg is best known for his science fiction works. I read a lot of Robert Silverberg when I was a teenager, his science fiction books. But this is more historical fiction and mythological fiction. It follows the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest pieces of literature. Originally this was written in Mesopotamia on clay tablets, and in this reimagining of Gilgamesh we see Gilgamesh growing up. It's his coming of age story. Gilgamesh is a big boy, he's taller than his peers, he's broad-shouldered, and he's very arrogant. He's not a character you can easily warm to. He's very much this alpha male. Gilgamesh is the son of Gilgamesh, who is the king, but the king dies very early in the book, and when Gilgamesh is still a boy, he's later warned by the priestess Inanna to get out of the city because the new king Dumuzi doesn't want Gilgamesh around, so Gilgamesh flees to Kish, another city, and there he's taken in by the king of Kish, who looks for Gilgamesh as a fortuitous ally in the future, maybe a vassal of his city of Kish, and he spends 4 years there learning about warcraft, learning how to fight. And he returns to Uruk when the king Dumuzi is ill and dying to become king. And Gilgamesh has this very big appetite for food, for women. Silverberg is very keen to show that he is not homosexual, although a lot of previous interpretations of Gilgamesh have shown him as homosexual. He does find finally a companion in Enkidu. Enkidu is an equally strong male, a wild man who is a match in strength for Gilgamesh like none of his peers are, and the two become inseparable. Gilgamesh calls him his other half at times. It's a strange story, and in the final part we have Gilgamesh going on a quest to find out the meaning of life and death. He goes to find the Mesopotamian Noah, Ziusudra, who it is believed survived the flood and is immortal. So Gilgamesh goes on a long quest through many hardships to try to find this legendary Noah character. I gave this book 3 out of 5. I wasn't very engaged by the character of Gilgamesh. He's just too arrogant, too alpha male, too full of himself. And I think his relationship with Enkidu is certainly ambiguous, a bit like Jonathan and David in the Bible. Then Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World by Jack Weatherford. This is a very interesting book. A lot of what has been written about Genghis Khan before has been quite negative. They say that history is written by the victors, but in Genghis Khan's case, Genghis Khan was illiterate, and a lot of what we know about Genghis Khan was written by Arabic and Persian historians, who were the victims of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan destroyed Baghdad, destroyed a lot of Persian cities, and the historians tended to inflate the numbers of people massacred and create stories that weren't true. Genghis Khan was quite happy about this because it spread propaganda, and many cities would surrender before the Mongols arrived because they feared what they'd heard about, what they'd read about the Mongols from others. And the making of the modern world is quite a claim. This book is in 3 parts. The first part is about Genghis Khan himself. Genghis Khan was born in around 1160. He wasn't Genghis Khan then, he was Temujin. Genghis Khan was a later title given to him. It was actually Chinggis Khan, but Genghis Khan was the Persian version of this, which is how we got the name, how Chaucer used the name, and Marco Polo and other Europeans. The legend has it that Genghis Khan was born holding this blood clot from the womb, which was seen as an omen of a great conqueror. In the beginning, he had to unite the disparate Mongol tribes. He was very much a tribal leader, the last great tribal leader. And the Mongol Empire that he initiated was the largest contiguous empire in the history of the world. This book draws a lot on the secret history of the Mongols, and it's almost in some ways a hagiography. The writer Jack Weatherford is very in awe of Genghis Khan and his achievements and the achievements of his grandson Kublai Khan. Genghis Khan himself didn't create any stately pleasure domes. He didn't construct very much. He was leading a nomadic tribe and they were moving around, and he lived in a humble ger, which was a Mongol sort of tent that moved around. He did construct a lot of bridges to move his army around quickly. His army could move a lot quicker than other armies in the 12th century because they had no infantry, they had no supply train. They were all on horseback, they were moving as cavalry, they could move very quickly, 25-30 miles a day was easily within their grasp. They'd often take towns, cities, villages by surprise. Before taking a town, they would send out envoys to ask the town to surrender. Those that did met with quite a favourable outcome. They had to pay tribute to the Mongols, but this was quite small, and they also had access to the rest of the Mongol Empire and the advantages that went with. The second part of the book is about Genghis Khan's sons. Ogadai was the first of the sons to be the next great Khan. He was the third son, and there was a lot of squabbling between the different sons, and the empire broke up into 4 parts essentially, although there was still communication between the different parts. And they conquered, under Ogadai they went into Europe, they went to Poland, and in the east they took over Korea. This was a massive empire, and when they were not at war, in times of peace, they were able to spread technology from one part of the empire to another. So Europe first discovered gunpowder and also paper. Paper was created by the Chinese, and it proved much more efficient and cheap to produce than the parchment the Europeans had been using. The Chinese got lemons from Persia. This was an incredible empire, and it was marked by religious tolerance, which was very unusual compared to Europe at the time. Where the third part of the book is about Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, who managed to rule China. He ruled China by becoming more Chinese than the Chinese themselves. This is quite common in history. A lot of leaders associated with one country actually came from another. Like if we think in the 20th century, Ataturk was born in Thessaloniki, Stalin was born in Georgia, Hitler was born in Austria, but they were associated with other countries. Napoleon in the 19th century was born in Corsica. So Kublai Khan was more acceptable to the Chinese than the Sung dynasty who had been ruling it before, and he created a new capital which in 1272 Kublai ordered the building of his new capital, and he connected it by canal to the Yellow River. The Mongols called the place Khanbalik, the city of the Khan. His Chinese subjects called it Dadu, the great capital, and it grew into the modern capital of Beijing. Kublai brought in Muslim architects and Central Asian craftsmen to design his city in a new style that offered more of a compromise between the tastes of nomadic steppe dwellers and a sedentary civilization. The boulevards stretched wide enough for 9 horsemen to gallop abreast through the city in case the native people rose up against their foreign rule. In many ways this seems a bit like a hagiography. It seems too much in praise to the Mongols. It's a good idea to redress the balance, but there were still a lot of people killed under the Mongol rule and Mongol expansion. They did increase cultural communication between cities, between different peoples, and increased the amount of trade. I would have liked more maps and more illustrations in a non-fiction book. We do have a couple of maps in here, but I would have liked to have seen some of the sea routes. Marco Polo took the sea route to Hormuz on his return from China, and yeah, that would have been interesting. The sea was a problem for the Mongols. It was a great land empire, but they failed to take Japan and Java. They created a big armada, but because of storms and other factors, they weren't able to conquer either Japan or Java. So it was very much a land empire. They did use river travel for trade, particularly along the Yellow River and the Yangtze. Overall, I'd give this book 4 stars. It's very interesting. And finally, for non-fiction November, I'm reading Library by Andrew Pettegree and Arthur de Weuden. Library of Fragile History, and this is about, as it suggests, the history of libraries. It starts with the earliest libraries, talks about the different materials for writing, from clay tablets of the Mesopotamians to papyrus, to parchment and paper, from illuminated scrolls to the printed books we have today. It's a fascinating insight into that. This is over 500 pages. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm enjoying what I've read so far. It's interesting the different type of people that have libraries and how in every generation the library is threatened by various elements, either by underfunding, like in today's world, or by neglect and by war and other things. Papyrus had the problem of not being very durable. Parchment was very durable, but it was very expensive, and often they cleaned the parchment of older manuscripts so they could put in new manuscripts. And there's also considerations about what the library should have, what the library shouldn't have, and who should be allowed to access the library and who shouldn't, and whether it's this big monument to the founders of the library, something to show off. Before the 19th century, libraries were very much like this thing you could show your wealth by the size of your library. Like today you might have a Ferrari or a Bugatti that you barely drive, but just to have it. Like they had the books, but they were not for reading, they were just for admiring. We have these two types of people. There's the collectors and the enthusiasts. The collectors just like owning these books, and the enthusiasts want to read them, want to look in their content. One of the reasons I call this channel Books, Reading and Stuff, because books and reading, they're connected, but they're also two very different ideas. I like books for what's in them. I don't collect books. I don't have any ancient tomes, but I have a lot of interesting books for the contents. If you like this video, you can like and subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye.